Hello and welcome to The Lobby, GameSpot's weekly chat show every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific, right here on GameSpot.com. I'm your host, Danny O'Dwyer, joined by Justin Haywald and Peter Brown, who has thankfully worn his glasses so that we can tell you two apart. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
I have had people come up to me at Comic-Con last year. I had someone come up to me going, I love your work at GameSpot. You're one of my favorite editors. And then he mentioned, he was like, that video that you did with this thing about a computer. And I was like, what do you think my name is? He's like, you're Peter Brown. Like, yes, I am. I'm the Internet's Peter Brown.
That would have been a bit harsh to correct him. Peter Brown, though, we're so happy to have you on so you can tell us all about you two's favorite Resident Evil game, Revelations 2.
Is that a U2 joke?
Yeah, do you remember that fucking Tomb Raider song?
No.
Woo! Wasn't that it?
I'll just say yes so we can move along.
Woo! All right.
I have no idea.
I got my one U2 reference in for this week. Okay. Resident Evil Revelations 2 Part 1.
Episode 1?
Episode 1.
I guess.
This is the first of a 4-part Resident Evil sequel to Revelations, the 10th game, I think, in the Resident Evil franchise.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Well, core franchise. We just get rid of those light gun games, just put them over there, and maybe some
Well,
of the
not quite
handheld
10th if you're going by the core games.
Is no? Veronica? You count that one?
No, yeah, we count that.
Tell me about Chapter 1, because I know you've played some more, but you can only talk about that one. So the review went up on GameSpot today.
Yeah.
What do you think of it so far?
I gave it a 7, so it's technically a good game.
Great. All right, that's that section done.
It's very fitting that it's an episode because Capcom is treating this like a TV show, you know, like it ends with next week on Resident Evil Revelations and this and that. But
it is next week, right?
Yeah, they're doing it in weekly episodes. When the last one comes out, you can actually buy the game and you'll get 2 extra episodes.
Oh.
Which is a bit interesting. But anyway, you know, it's good so far as Resident Evil games go. It's certainly not the scariest. It's not the worst either, but
It seems to play more into the more modern Resident Evils as far as like camera angles and the way that you go around below and shit up and shooting everything.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are no fixed camera angles. It kind of feels a little bit like Resident Evil 4 and 5 when it comes to the action sequences. It's not as over the top as 6, thank God.
This is set between 5 and 6, right? In timeline-wise.
Possibly.
You're playing as Moira Burton?
Moira Burton, but Claire Redfield, but then also Barry Burton and a mysterious girl named Natalia. But yeah, basically the gist is like there's this company called TerraSave. They have this ridiculous corporate video at the beginning, and it's sort of prefacing a party, and Claire and Moira are kidnapped, and they wake up in this horrible cell, and somebody is sort of orchestrating this big event for them, and they have to try to escape from here, and they just run into these horrible abominations that are just trying to murder them. And
how old is Moira when you're playing her?
It's a good question. They don't say her age.
Is she a tween?
She seems like a tween, but she actually works for this company.
Right.
So she's at least 16.
Okay.
But I think she's supposed to be more in her 20s.
Do you think that the dark companies in Resident Evil abide by normal U.S. working laws?
Good question. This one is actually like they're like a front-facing company that's there to like clean up bioterrorism and stuff.
Got it.
Yeah.
It's about time somebody's going to do it. I hear there's some tweenish cursing in this game.
Yeah.
Something about a bucket of fucks at some stage.
Accurate. Yeah, they actually cleaned it up since the preview events that we used to go to. Did you ever go to any of those?
So it was saltier before.
Yeah, it was saltier before. There was this line that Moira had where she was trying to say, like, what the hell is this? And what she really said was, what the cock is that? and they capitalized every letter in the word cock. Thankfully, they got rid of that. But
did they re-record it? So, like, does it sound, like she said before, like, what the cock is that? And like, someone went back and they're like, oh, that doesn't make sense.
Yes.
We need to re-record that.
And I believe they replaced it with one of the things on my list. I have every line that Moira says where she swears on a piece of paper.
In Chapter 1.
In Chapter 1.
So presumably there's 3 more
Episode
chapters
1.
of this.
5.
Of cursing to
well,
and 2 more. At least 3 more. Oh, no spoilers. Fair enough.
oh,
So does it get better than that? Does it get better than what the cock? Which is pretty good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she says typical things like, what the hell are you doing? Stuff like that, and that's kind of boring. But she has ones where she says, I mean, what in the moist barrel of fucks?
Okay.
Moist
What?
is a gross word.
I know. It doesn't, but who says something like that?
A moist barrel of fucks.
That's not. It doesn't even make sense. She
not a
also
wet
says,
barrel.
"Who the fuck is quoting poetry? Fuck you, Hollywood. That wasn't even close to easy. Also, Barry can kiss my ass. That guy, what is it? That guy bitches and granny swears about everything.
Wait, did she refer to her father as Barry?
Yeah, because she doesn't like her dad apparently. But what is granny swearing?
You know, it's like
Granny
when you throw
swearing?
a granny ball. Like when you go bowling and you do an underhand. So a granny swear.
Yeah, all right. So it's like a soft lob. She's not a granny swear. She says things like, "You moist bucket of fucks."
The last line that she has,
Fart. It would be fart. A moist bucket of farts because it's a granny swear.
Right. Okay.
the last line you hear from her when she's
Somebody
in
who's
a-
calling me there. I think it might be Wes Moonves. I'm just going to put this over there.
she's in a very desperate situation, and this is the last thing you hear. Jesus, is anyone even out there? Fucking shit on a stick.
Okay.
That's how her character closes out episode 1.
Great.
Is just swearing up a storm. And like, I don't know. She plays an important role in the plot, but otherwise she just seems like she's there to sort of be this angsty, like young, brash person. But I don't think anyone who wrote this game has ever talked to anyone.
Oh, does it sound like that? It's like old people writing dialogue for
Totally.
a different generation.
Yeah, like there are some times when she swears that are fine, but for a lot of the times, it's such a try hard.
Great. Well,
Character.
then following in the long tradition of Resident Evil dialogue being completely ridiculous and funny for the wrong reasons.
I'd like to talk about how the game is good though, because
Okay,
it's not
okay.
all poor swearing, and I want to represent the good stuff. Once you get to play as Barry Burton and this girl Natalia, the buddy system gets a lot better. Like you have to play with Moira when you're playing with Claire. She's kind of useless. Natalia, this young girl who can kind of sneak by enemies and they won't notice her. There are some scenes where it's actually like a really scary moment, but Barry isn't the right fit. Even though he's got like an assault rifle, a minigun, and a pistol, this young girl, this little tiny girl, is like the right man for the job. And you really do get that sense of being scared because it's just sort of like, crap, I have to use her, but she's so vulnerable and you can't see what's out there. And so this game does have a few moments of tension that are really good, that do deliver what I think people who like Resident Evil games are looking for. It's just kind of stuck in the middle of a bunch of stuff that's not so great.
Right. So is the game split into two sections then, almost, where like you're two different sets of buddies? Is that how it plays out?
Yeah, so you finish the section with Claire and Moira, and then it switches to Barry.
That's a great crawl.
Yeah. She's good at the crouch crawl.
It feels very The Last of Us in some ways. Like when I keep looking at that and you see the young girl sneaking past.
Yep.
While zombies, and you have the big guy with huge guns.
Yeah, letting your daughter do all the work.
And also, Barry Burton sounds exactly like Liam Neeson, and hey, why not? He's going to rescue his kidnapped daughter.
That's fair enough.
So there you go.
Excellent. So the review for episode 1 is live on the site. Will you be
Yeah.
doing reviews every week then for the next couple of weeks?
Every week, and then I'm going to do a review of the entire game.
Right, which will also be, there's a boxed version as well. Like it's
Yeah.
legit, yeah. So
And if
download
you,
it
I
sometime.
think that's the only way you get the extra 2 episodes. I could be wrong. You might be able to buy a season pass. That would make sense, but
Cool. All right. We will look forward to talking to you next week on the lobby about episode 2. Let us know what you think about Resident Evil Revelations 2 in the comments below. Let us know what you think of moist buckets of fuck. We'll be back next week with an update on all the curses in the second episode of that game. All right, Alexa Ray Correa is here to talk about Mordor, no better lady for the job. But we'll be back in a second. First of all, going to check out the latest trailer for the Lords of Fallen DLC. Shadow of Mordor was a fantastic game that came out last year. In fact, it picked up GameSpot's Game of the Year award, and they've been releasing a bunch of DLC over Christmas and beyond. And the latest one, I think it's the last one, just came out today. Alexa Ray Correa, expert on all things Tolkien in the office. You've been playing it since yesterday. What do you think about this expansion that is basically sort of fixing the ending of the game?
So the problem with the ending of Shadow of Mordor is the final boss is essentially a QuickTime event. It's a bunch of QuickTime events, and you don't actually get to fight Sauron, even though the whole game is sort of like, go against Sauron. So what this does is it gives you an entire new campaign. It's about 10 missions long, and you're fighting as Celebrimbor, who is the ghost that's attached to Talion that gives you all the Wraith powers, but he's still alive in this version. It's before all that stuff happens.
Yeah, spoilers if you haven't played Shadow of Mordor.
Sorry, guys.
He is the Bright Lord.
Yes,
that's
he is
what
the Bright Lord.
Schmiegel was referring to him as, right?
It's the name. I think Bright Lord is an epithet that Monolith has ascribed to him, but Celebrimbor in the Lord of the Rings lore is the forger of the Rings of Power. He Sauron pretends to be a good guy, basically, and shows up at his home and is like, hey, let's make some jewelry. And Celebrimbor, he's a master craftsman, so he's like, sure.
It's like, I want to make some jewelry.
Yeah,
let's do it.
So they
Got
make
six-pack.
jewelry.
Well, he makes these rings that are super powerful. And of course, Alexa, for anyone who doesn't know, is a scholar of Tolkien.
I am a scholar of Tolkien. I went to college for this stuff, and I read about video games. But the whole premise is that Monolith took that relationship with Sauron and Celebrimbor, and Sauron does, in the books, trick Celebrimbor into making the One Ring, like by accident. But what Monolith has done is they sort of made it so that Celebrimbor is sort of forced into it, and then at the last minute pulls back. And as you can see, he has the ring. Like, he steals the ring from Sauron. Literally, if you watch the cutscene, he literally, like, Sauron's holding it, and he pokes his finger in the ring and runs away with it.
That'll do it.
So Celebrimbor is using the ring to do the same thing Talion was doing in Shadow of Mordor, which is subjugate these orcs.
Yes.
And it's interesting because the Bright Lord focuses on domination rather than killing. So you have a whole new set of the Nemesis system. You have 5 new war chiefs.
Are you playing in the first section or the second section of Mordor?
You're in the first map, and it's pre-fall Mordor, which you can see by all of this new gritty grit and darkness, and sometimes Sauron will talk to you, and the edges of the screen will go red because Sauron's talking, he's
a piece of shit,
say, basically. So, new war chiefs, you have to dominate all of them. There's 5. The interesting thing is in the main game, you could go in and essentially take out a war chief's bodyguards one by one and make him weaker so he has no protection. You can't do that in the Bright Lord.
Because you're only dominating them.
Because you can only dominate them. And you can't take out the bodyguards. Like you can't take them out. You can't take them out first. You have to go after them like immediately. So it's you against these war chiefs who start at level 20. So they're already very, very difficult.
So you can't. So what I did, and I think the last portion of Shadow of Mordor was you dominated the war chiefs, and then you essentially just used them to replace the existing war chief.
Yes.
Which was super easy.
Well, this one it's a little.
So it doesn't
harder.
let you do that.
No, like the whole board, like they're all level 20. They're all very difficult. What you can do, which is something that I actually really appreciate, is you can dominate the lower orcs. Like you can run through an area and they'll be like having dinner and you'll be like mine, and now you have 4 guys.
Oh, cool.
And that adds to your existing retinue of guys. So if you're completing a mission and you have to, one really hard mission was you have the big group of orcs and you have to keep 15 branded orcs in your retinue for 2 minutes.
Okay.
And the orcs that are not serving you will kill the orcs that are serving you, so that number is constantly going down. So you have to quickly brand more to keep them up, and if you get under, I think, 10, the count resets, the 2 minutes resets.
So that sounds like a whole new intentional focus, because one of the other things you told me yesterday when you were playing was that one of the main, I guess, attacks in the game that was so handy, and I kept upgrading, was being able to just fire arrows one by one and slow the game down.
Yeah.
But the slow-mo's gone now, right?
Slow-mo's gone. I talked to the design director, Michael DePlatter, last week, and he told me that they removed that slowdown because in Lord of the Rings lore, the elves are all very skilled with bows and they're very quick with them. So it seemed pretty seemed like a good idea to just take out that slowdown because elves just know how to do it. They just know how to do that
but
shit.
do you know how to do it when you're like
No.
controlling an elf and you're like, no, it's missed, no, it's missed.
And the perspective goes into almost first person, so it's got like a shooter element to it now, and you have to work very quickly. However, your arrows are more powerful. You can one hit shoot an orc and then he's done. I think you can shoot from far away, and I think this guy and you can dominate now with the arrows as well.
Excellent.
You can swoop in and grab them.
So how are you actually enjoying it then? Is it worthwhile? Is it an essential thing to play if you were a fan of the game? Like, I loved Mordor. I kind of would like any excuse to go back and play it again. Like, is it sort of an essential addition to the game?
I would say I think it's very, very different. It's a similar but different experience to Shadow of Mordor, and it's very, very difficult. If you did fine in Mordor and you loved it and you want more, I think it'd be worth going back and trying this out. Sort of offers things from a different perspective, and you get to fight Sauron, and you get everything from Celebrimbor's point of view. And whereas Talion was sort of like, you sort of felt for him, Celebrimbor is actually he's almost a little nasty. Like, he's very, very like crude and a little crazy. But I like it. I really like it. I'm not quite done with it, but I like that it's offering that sort of a challenge. So,
Excellent.
I mean, yeah, if you like Mordor, I'd go back to it.
Fantastic.
Well, and one thing do you start with all of your powers? Because I felt like when I was playing Shadow of Mordor was a lot of fun. Like, it was a good challenge, and then you got to the end where it's like, oh my god, this is like I'm basically jumping over people, branding them, and then I just have an army of orcs who are doing all of the killing for me.
Yeah.
So does it feel harder after that? Because that end was a little too.
Yeah, no, you felt very. At the end of Shadow of Mordor, I think we all felt pretty powerful.
Yeah.
You start Bright Lord, Celebrimbor's, all his skills are unlocked. You have all of them available to you. However, when I was talking earlier about how you have to sort of focus on dominating the orcs in the Nemesis system instead of killing them. If you kill them, you get runes for your weapons, which are the only things you can upgrade. But if you're focusing on dominating, you can't kill them. So you have to sort of make decisions, like, depending on who you're killing. Like, do I kill this measly little guy for like a 18% health upgrade, or do I dominate him? Will that help me in the long run? And I liked that about the first game, and I sort of like that here. But yeah, no, you have everything. You are ready to go out the gate when you start Bright Lord. You are the Bright Lord.
Excellent.
Ready to go.
Alexa, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Telling us all about that. I'm going to pick that up later on. That's available today for the general public. Please let us know what you think about that. And of course, GameSpot's Game of the Year for 2014, Shadow of Mordor, in the comments below. All right, it's been a little bit of a slow news week for the past couple of weeks. I feel like part of that is to do with what's going on next week.
And you said, it has been a bit of a
GDC,
snow
baby.
week.
Oh boy.
What?
It's also been a bit of a snow week. For everywhere else, it's not San Francisco.
Not here.
Was that a snow joke?
Like, you said it.
Snow joke?
No.
Mary's not laughing. You shouldn't be laughing. You're going to PAX East at the end of
Yeah, we are.
next
I feel
weekend.
so
So
bad.
are you, right?
My
Alexa.
old stomping grounds.
Yeah.
In the
Won't
snow.
be doing much
I'll be
stomping in the
stomping.
snow.
I'll be
And our
stomping.
readers, I'm sure, know Eddie McCoo out in Boston, who's
Yes.
one of our regular news writers. We're bringing him to GDC to sunny California.
Are you kidding me?
For 3 days.
And then he's going back
And then we're going to send him back.
to the
Aw,
into the
that's
snow.
such a tease. Poor Eddie.
well, speaking of teases, Simon Carlos from GDC is in the back. He's about to come on and tell us all about the Game Developers Conference, which is starting in San Francisco next week. But until then, we have the latest trailer for Street Fighter V. Looks like Charlie Nash is making his way to the series. He's looking pretty good. So let's check out the reveal, which came out just earlier today. The Game Developers Conference, GDC, is on right here in San Francisco next week, and we're very happy to be joined by Mr. Simon Carlos.
Hello there.
Sir, how are you? You must be super not busy at the moment, right?
Yeah, there's a few things going on, but I thought I'd spare some time to come and hang out with you guys just for a few minutes.
Well, considering your office is but like a block and a half down the street.
Yeah, I got here like an hour and a half early because I got overexcited, and then I was like, I'll just walk to the GameSpot offices like 2 blocks away, so there you go.
One of the things about GDC that I find funny after sort of joining the Games Press was that for years and years I used to watch the awards and the IGF Awards and GDC Awards on GameSpot and see all the news that came out of it. But it's one of the most interesting awards that's on, but I know for people who are sort of outside of the industry who don't actually attend, it's kind of an unknown. So, like, what is the GDC Awards for folks who maybe aren't familiar with it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, in this case, GDC stands for the Game Developers Choice Awards, and and we're obviously one of the few awards out there that is really voted entirely by the community. And that is to say, our community of game developers. So we spend a lot of time picking about 1,000 people from the industry, and they end up voting every year on the best titles. And the best thing about it is, it's actually in the same evening as the Independent Games Festival, so you get 2 awards for the price of 1, and we get through them both in under 2 hours most of the time.
Yeah,
which is reasonably impressive since I don't know how long's the Oscars nowadays, like 3.5.
Absolutely. Mr. Schaefer is reprising his role as the MC of the GDC Awards. Yeah,
that's right. Tim Schaefer is back. He does he does every other year.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah, because it turns out he's running a game company or something, and apparently he has to work on that. And needless to say, he's not written one word of his script so far.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he's probably not watching, but he's renowned. Actually,
he's notorious for that, right?
He's a notorious procrastinator, yes. And actually, one year he managed to make a Flash game about not writing the script.
Oh, really?
If you go look online, you'll find somewhere on doublefind.com there's this Flash game which he did with a bunch of people, and it's all about how he hasn't written the script yet, and he genuinely sent us that with a week to go.
Nice.
And he was like, guys,
just to rub salt in it, yeah.
I haven't written a word, but I've done this Flash adventure game about not writing a word.
Has Nathan Vella Cappy made any Flash game this year? He's hosting the IGF Awards again.
No, Nathan actually has got us a draft of his script.
Nice.
So Nathan Vella hosting the Independent Games Festival from Cappy of Super Time Force fame, and we're really excited. He actually hosted last year, and he's a really good host. And again, we try as much as possible to get people from the game development community hosting, because we don't have anything against other awards that have shall we say more polished hosts sometimes, but we really like the genuine hosts who are kind of goofing off. And
well, I guess that's the thing with GDC, is that it's a conference for game developers. So of course you should have it's very much a sort of I guess it must be really interesting for people who work tirelessly in various parts of the world to finally have a week to come together and share ideas and share experiences. What's the sort of main focus for people who attend the conference itself?
Well, it's interesting because you're right, and one of the good things about GDC is there's so many people nowadays who are like indies and working solo or working in small groups, and it's so great for them all to come to San Francisco and get a chance to hang out, because they often don't get to see the people that they talk to on social media all year. But I think there's always a bunch of focuses around the show, and what we've done is we've gradually built up like a whole bunch of kind of summits within the main show. So, for example, we have a summit just about indie, we have a summit about free to play, we have a summit about game narrative only. But actually this year we have some new summits, and we have for the first time an esports summit, which is kind of esports is not necessarily a novel idea, but we've kind of made it a rule. We don't necessarily produce a summit like at the very first opportunity,
like a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. Otherwise we would have had like a 3D TV summit, which would have been perhaps not the best idea.
No.
So we try and time it so we're somewhere. The hype curve kicks in, but at some point you realise actually there's something ongoing here that will benefit everyone. And I think actually we actually did a survey amongst our developers, and we found that although only about 15% of our audience are currently working on an esports, a game they consider an esport, I think about 85% of them think it's going to be a big thing in the future. Yeah. And also there's a lot of lessons that regular developers can learn from what's going on in esports, which is there's just so many good learnings for how stuff displays on streaming. Streaming is really important. How multiplayer competition works. So we have a bunch of interesting talks. That's on Tuesday. We have a whole day program related to that. And And we have, for example, the lead designer of League of Legends is going to be interviewed by Frank Lantz. We have a talk on Counter-Strike Go modding. We have a talk on StarCraft 2 interface modding. We have a talk on the role of women in esports, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of really interesting stuff there. So I think it's going to be good.
There's so much going on at GDC. I know here on GameSpot we're going to be streaming the awards, the IGF awards,
A few select panels.
select panels as well. Oh, here they are on screen right now. And we also will have a recording of John Carmack's keynote, which might run on just a little bit longer than
8 hours.
He's already got planned.
Yeah. So John Carmack is speaking on Wednesday, and it's kind of a featured talk after our flash forward, which kicks off the day. And we left him a little time into lunch because he's already said in his talk description he intends to go until someone pulls him off stage with like a hook.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what we're expecting. But yeah, it's definitely cool.
And GDC is just such a great time for developers to learn a lot about the industry. And I think for us and for our readers, it's really interesting to get that inside look, to learn about a lot of things that usually are kind of hidden from us. But there's also a lot of news, especially recently, like, people are doing some reveals and hardware reveals, software reveals. Do you guys try to push back on that at all to make sure that it stays focused on the developers?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because we have had in the past, we have had keynotes to the show, and although I would say John Carmack is like a big talk, we officially kind of have stayed away from keynotes recently because there's been a thing in the past where people have been tempted to announce things to the world, but actually there's a bunch of developers in front of them.
Yeah.
So and it's difficult because whilst you might want to talk about a particular thing such as XNA that's very relevant to developers, there's a bunch of other stuff you also want to get out about your platform. So, so I think what we've decided is we're really happy for people to make announcements like around the show, and obviously we're super excited that Valve seems to be announcing things, and we do have talks on this type of thing. But I think we definitely think that E3 is the place for platform holders and large publishers to be making kind of here's our lineup kind of thing. And I think what we're seeing with GDC is people are announcing new hardware at the show, and they are showing a bunch of games around the show, often kind of, in the peripheral area. We do have also quite a lot of playable games around our show floor, but they're much more kind of games that are trying to get some some interest with publishers or funders.
Shopping them out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
There's no shortage of game conferences now for people to announce stuff if they so want to. But like you said, perhaps one of the most interesting things about the announcements we're hopefully going to be seeing between Valve yesterday showing off their Steam Universe thing, or talking about it being at GDC. If VR is actually going to be something that tangibly works, then surely the companies, several of which seem to be at GDC shopping around, need to sell it to developers before consumers will get the hook on it. What do you think about all the different VR stuff that's going to be available at GDC next week?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because it really has been, the VR tech has now been available to developers for a little while. So we're starting to see games that are starting to look pretty good. We have games like Adrift, which is the game Adam Orth's working on. We have a game called Classroom Aquatic that I'm kind of a fan of, where you're
good title.
Yeah, you're like a dolphin and you have to cheat on a multiple choice test.
Okay.
And you're in like an old school classroom, and the teacher is like a diver, and you have to avoid the teacher noticing, and so it's sort of a movement based. It's pretty bizarre. It's
only available on Oculus.
Yeah. But it actually speaks to the fact that some of the user interface issues on VR are just completely different. You know, like the fact is, if you're moving your head and your character in quotes is moving, that's such a different feel, such a different gameplay feel to most other games.
Yeah, Alien Isolation was a completely different experience when you had the Rift on, and then also like games like Work Together Where Everyone Explodes, or Shut Up Where Everyone Explodes.
Keep talking.
Keep talking. Yeah, the complete opposite of what I was saying. Like where you're literally got your hands in you're just interacting with visuals.
Yeah.
It seems like this is like we've been talking about VR, and like it's a massive news attraction on the site. Like people are really interested in it. What do you hope comes out of VR GDC this year? Do you think, is there a worry that if there's like 3 or 4 different platform holders who are like making their own little individual thing, that it'll just fragment that space up too much and consumers won't get the best.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue with peripherals is always fragmentation and getting to a big install base. So I definitely think that it is a concern that if you have too many systems and not one unified standard, then maybe there will be an issue. But I think that's a little bit being alleviated nowadays by game engines like Unity and Unreal, because basically, if you are a developer, then you've got to know that Unity is going to help you make sure you're going to be on these platforms fairly easily, or Unreal or any other game engine. So if you're building in one of those engines, it should be much easier to port to all the systems, and that didn't used to be the case. And that's why you would see a bunch of conversions coming out very late after games coming out. But I mean, that's not the only thing. But yeah, I mean, I think one thing that people didn't appreciate about VR is I do think that in many cases, conventional console games don't work very well in VR. You need just a whole different kind of gameplay experience, and I do wonder sometimes whether that gameplay experience is going to be completely accessible to the mainstream, who are used to like ultra fast, ultra kind of action-based games, because you can only whip your head around so quickly, when you're in VR. But I think there's going to be a bunch of really interesting experiences, and I think the fact that Valve is supporting it, so strongly, although we haven't quite worked out how yet, but the fact that Valve will have something, and certainly Sony has something, and Oculus has something, and certainly Nvidia seems to be making an announcement at the show, and there's been some rumours that that's VR related as well, although that hasn't been confirmed. Yeah, there's starting to be a few platforms out there.
Yeah, a lot of people are interested in it for sure. Justin?
I was going to say, there are just so many panels and so much going on, and I know that you're going to be ridiculously busy during the week, but is there anything that you're already like, I'm going to not be able to do any other work. I'm going to go to this panel. I really want to check this out, guys. I'm not going to be able to work during that time. Anything you really want to see?
That's a really good question. I think what I really enjoy the classic game postmortems we have. Every year we've started that for our 25th anniversary, which was I think 3 or 4 years ago. So now we've had maybe 16 to 20 of these classic postmortems, and they're all available for free streaming on our GDC Vault website, by the way, and I think a number of them are archived on GameSpot as well. So and actually this year we have Star Control is one of the ones we have, which is obviously a real classic early strategy title. We have Yar's Revenge as well, which is a very early Atari 2600 game, but I'm particularly excited about that because Howard Scott Warshaw is the guy who made that, and he also famously made E.T.
Excellent.
Which he made in 6 weeks.
I'm sure he loves talking about that.
Yeah, it is like, and he said obviously that we didn't make him do a whole hour on E.T. That would have been a little cruel. But he did say during that classic postmortem he's going to talk a little bit about the experience of making E.T.
And are all those available on the GDC Vault? Can anyone access that?
Yeah, so we don't quite do it in real time because we're recording so many talks at the same time. Yes. But I would say like maybe 1 to 2 weeks after the show, you'll be able to see all of the classic postmortems. And we also have the Atari 2600 game Adventure, which was famously the first game ever to have an Easter egg in it, and so I'm excited about that just because honestly some of these guys are getting a little bit older. It's important that they talk about the games because at some point they aren't going to be around, and there's going to be a bunch of questions that we wish would have asked them about how they made the game. So I think doing good stuff for game history is good. I'm also quite involved in the Indie Game Summit, and we've managed to pull in some real interesting talks. I'm a big fan of 80 Days, the iPhone game, and there's actually a couple.
Just started playing that last week. It's fantastic.
It's an awesome game, and actually there's a couple of talks at the show, and there's one by the writer Meg Giant, who's going to be talking about the writing for that game, which I think is really interesting. There's kind of there's steampunk elements to it, but there's a little bit of kind of light romance in it, and all kinds of kind of interesting things. So I think. I think games like that are really cool, and I'm pleased. I think, especially with my gaming taste nowadays, I like playing kind of, fairly swift repeat kind of games. So, although some of that is Twitch, like stuff like Geometry Wars, I also like playing 80 Days because you can get through it, decent amount of time. You can replay it. There's a lot of replayability.
I think there was a fear a few years back that like mobile gaming was just going to take over everything, and that hasn't been the case at all.
Yeah, and it's actually, and the good thing about where mobile has gone at this point is there's a bunch of really interesting games in around kind of the $5 price point that I think anyone who's played games for a long time can still get very excited about. It's just a question sometimes of finding those games, which I think is difficult. Where hopefully folks like you can help out with that.
Well, I thought last year was a great example of some fantastic games sort of popping up. Where I feel like in previous years, perhaps it was more difficult to find real quality games. Like I've played so much Desert Golf over the last couple of months, and, and 80 Days as well, of course. Monument Valley as well, another fantastic game which has just been so popular between such a bunch of different ages as well.
And revisiting old form, like keeping that endless runner, keeping it new and fresh is something I'm surprised that people keep doing. Alto, a game I recently started playing, Crossy Road, such simple ideas.
God damn it, Crossy Road. You showed up at Crossy Road for like 2 weeks, and then I ended up getting it at PAX South. And just tap, 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 tap. It asked me for $1 every 2 minutes, though, which is something I really do not want to have anymore in games.
Yes, well, that's the bad side of it, but I think the good side is, you're starting to see Apple getting behind some of this. Recently they famously put up on their front page, like, here's some games you pay once, and you actually might be excited to keep playing.
Yeah, it's called pay to play.
You might have
a brand new concept.
But I mean, I think that's ultimately good because we definitely cover, and we've actually, it's interesting. Sometimes in the past we've had people complain because we famously last year had a sponsored talk called "Safely Monetizing Teens."
Oh wow! Wow! There's a title.
and it was and what they actually taught us is that we should screen the talks, screen the titles of even the sponsored talks, because ultimately that was something that someone actually really clearly marked as a sponsor paid to have that, but it still reflected quite badly on GDC that we allowed it through.
So it's still a learning process.
Exactly. So we learned about that. But even this year, there are talks talking about the big spenders, the whales in free to play, and that's one whole area. But on the other end, we have a bunch of stuff about indie and esports and VR. So we have. We have stuff for everyone to get excited about. We also have stuff for everyone to get angry about, if you would like.
Was there any headline that you got that you remember? You were like, "Oh no, we can't do that."
What one particular talk title? Well, it was that one from last year after I saw it.
This year, was there anything that you were like, "Oh, since we're vetoing this year, did anything come up?" And you're like,
"No,
nope.
Actually." And the funny thing about that was that there were a couple of things about that talk. Firstly, some people went to check it out, and they found it was actually a very sensible, anodyne, practical talk. It was just, the concept of internet outrage, you can get quite excited about it. But it was actually a pretty standard talk about, there's all kinds of laws about that. It turns out there's copper laws about what you're meant to...
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's these laws in the US called CIPPA, which are about how you're meant to target people who are under 14. So it was about that. But of course...
I find GDC to be, like, if there was ever a conference, like, I remember always wanting to go to E3 for years and years and years, being in Ireland, and then like GDC always seemed like an interesting thing as well. But for all the conferences I've ever been to, GDC is the one that I come away with just feeling like so humbled about how fucking little I know about games development. I remember watching this talk last year from the guy from Twinbeard who made Frog Fractions, and he was basically did an entire talk about how to like obfuscate your game to the like how to hide your game from the public, and how Frog Fractions 2, it's been kickstarted, probably the best Kickstarter video I've ever seen, and still nobody knows if it's out yet, if it is has he hidden it in something, and it was an entire talk about how to hide your game. And it's such a crazy concept that you never think of. It wouldn't grab a headline on GameSpot or another game site, but it was just such a interesting insight into the brain of creators.
Yeah, there's some really esoteric stuff at the show. We actually have a talk this year in the main conference in design about how 19th century board games can influence today's video game design. And
why not?
And I will say, we try and go. The majority of our talks are quite practical. We have a lot. As your viewers might or might not know, we have a lot of very practical talks about, engines and actually my favourite practical talk from this year is there was a talk about how they kept the wildlife stuck to the ground in Far Cry 4. Because it turns out that's actually a really difficult technical problem.
All right.
Because all these mountain lions clearly can't be floating 10 foot off the ground. And so there's an entire talk, 60 minutes, on how they kept the wildlife stuck to the ground in Far Cry 4. And if you're making a game with a ton of characters and a ton of mountains. That's absolutely a difficult thing, but that's the kind of thing the average person would just not think about.
Wow,
So,
that's a bug I would have liked to have seen in Assassin's Creed, actually. Simon, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. Best of luck next week.
Yeah.
And, of course, a bunch of news from GDC and also a bunch of talks. And, of course, the live stream of the GDC Choice Awards and the IGF Awards will be on GameSpot.com next week. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Lobby. Please let us know what you think in the comments below. We'll be back next week. Of course, it's GDC. It's just down the road. So we're going to have a bunch of developers on the couch showing off their wares and telling us everything that's going on down at the conference for those of you who can't make it into town. So we'll see you then. Enjoy a week of gaming, and we'll see you on the other side. Adios!